This is Mike Heffernan, author of Rig, an oral history of the Ocean Ranger. His book has been adapted by Joan Sullivan into a play which will show at the Arts and Culture Centre's Basement Theatre beginning on February 14th. Hi, Mike.
Hi.
You couldn't have been very old, I guess, when the Ocean Ranger tragedy happened, so how did you become interested in writing a book about it?
My father's first cousin, Ron Heffernan, was one of the victims. Fortunately for his family, he was among the 22 bodies recovered, and his story and that of both his sister and his brother Ray, all of whom worked in the oil patch here, was kept alive in my family as part of the broader family history. So I'd known of the impact that the disaster had on the community, and being a trained historian, I had some interest in the disaster, and really, essentially, the project started up was I wanted to know who Ron Heffernan was. Who is this young man who died tragically? And I initially thought he was younger than he was, and I visited his grave at Holy Sepulchre Cemetery. And unbeknownst to me, there were two other victims adjacent his. That alone had a very big impact on me. But then to find out that he was my age at that particular time, right before I started or had decided to write the book. So, as I said, essentially the book is about who Ron Heffernan was, and it grew from there.
Great. So, why did you choose to write the book through a collection of interviews?
I was going in that direction anyway, creative nonfiction, oral history, and it brings in a number of other genres like travel writing. But also, I wanted the people to speak for themselves. I wanted a working class, blue collar history. I didn't want a top down history where executives were speaking. I thought that was important. I wanted the emotion, the raw emotion of those people and how it affected their lives. I wanted them to speak of that. I wasn't so much interested in what is the history, because anyone can find out the history. You can pick up the Royal Commission report and read that, or watch documentaries and find out what was the Ocean Ranger and how did it sink. Everyone knows that. What was important to me was who were these people and how were their lives affected by this terrible tragedy.
And how long did the interview process take?
It was pretty quick, to be honest. Initially, I thought it would take a long time, and that simply by the nature of the oil industry, very transient industry. People travel a lot, move a lot. I was very lucky in that everyone besides a handful of people still lived in St. John's. And those people that didn't, off the top of my head, I think there were two. They availed themselves to telephone interviews and assisting me in writing their own chapters. But everyone was in and around St. John's, and were very kind and more than open with their stories and opening their hearts and their homes to me. It took about 2 years, as I said, and it was a very quick process for a book of this nature. The current project I'm working on is taking much longer than I had anticipated. It's taking about 3.5 years, and so that's about how long it takes for 3 years. So 2 years was very, very quick. The interview process was very quick. Each interview was approximately about 2 hours long, some longer, some shorter, some I did follow-ups.
Right, so how many people did you interview in total?
Somewhere around 45, I think. 36 voices are included in the book.
Right, wow. So you were obviously immersed in sad memories of the disaster for 2 years, I guess, and how difficult was that?
It's at times very stressful, but you take away this idea of hope. These people, many of them, their spirits were crushed by the disaster, but it's, for me, what I took away from the entire experience is that they lived through this traumatic event, the worst 2 weeks of their lives, but yet they carried on. They moved on in their life. They grew as people. I think that's what the theme, one of the more more important themes that comes through in the book. Although it is very heavy material and it's upsetting, these people live through that. You're just reading, you're experiencing their lives through the written word, but they got through it. They continue to live it. They continue to go through it.
Right. Are there any particular people or moments that stood out during the interview process that you can share with us?
Sure. Interviewing Ron Heffernan's sister Elaine was probably, for me, the most emotional part of the entire process, contacting her and speaking with her and then writing about it. Just the way that she spoke of her brother. And I remember when it was really early in winter, and it hadn't, I don't know if it had snowed or it really wasn't snowing at that point, but we went there, and I remember I wore shoes there because I wanted to look nice, and as I was walking, she wanted to down the road from my mother, and I was walking, it started to snow, and I thought, I'm going to ruin my shoes now. But when I went there, and she was very emotional when she started talking about Ron, and she said to me that first snowfall of every year, I think of him. And it's those moments that we'll simply never forget.
What do you feel is the most important thing you took away from the experience from writing Rake?
To cherish life. And from these people, hope. The idea that they persevered and that they continued their lives. Particularly the widows. Many of them, as Clee Newhook pointed out, he was the executive director of the Families Foundation. We all carry around this notion of what is a widow. You think of an elderly lady in her 70s or 80s perhaps. But for those widows of the Ocean Ranger disaster, they were all in their 20s, early 30s. They were just starting their lives, really. Their husbands, many of them, were just starting their professional lives. But to know that they could go on, that after facing this tragedy of such magnitude, yeah, that's really what I took away from it. To cherish life and to live each day to the fullest. It's a cliche, I know, but when you meet people who've been through those sort of circumstances, it really strikes a chord. It certainly changed. The book changed me. It changed me forever.
So the Ocean Ranger disaster next week will be 30 years ago, and do you think that it still has relevance today?
It has more relevance than ever, particularly with our community still dealing with the Cougar crash 2 years ago. Oil companies are all about the bottom line, the dollar, and they'll cut corners at any expense, regardless if that costs lives. And it's not only the government's role as the regulator, but our role to keep these industries in check. And I think that's the role that artists play, is that they put a face on disaster. Because the oil patch is out there. It could be on the moon. We don't see it. It's not facing us every day. It's not. These men, they go out there and they come back. And if we put a face on those people and the victims of industrial disaster and articulate their emotions and their experiences, then it's no longer an anomaly, an abstraction. We can somehow feel what they're feeling, and I think that's the importance of work that I do, work that Joan does, to put a face on industrial disaster and to help people understand.
Why do you feel people should come? If you could tell people a reason to come and see this show, what would you say?
I think it's not an easy experience. I don't think the best art is an easy experience, at least when dealing with this type of material. But it's a transformative experience.